Välkommen to fulfilling this belly sting. A show dedicated to aligning a journey to a better mental health using the understandings of the ancient Norse. Join us each weekday morning at 7 a.m. Alaska time. Someone's little girl, daughter, sister, girlfriend, fiance, wife, cousin, mother, auntie, grandmother, great grandmother, elder, disappears, shattering, a family, a community, the world. There is something we can all do. Remember them. Like that.
GodMorgan, and happy Tuesday to you. I hope this week is going well for you, and that energy at which you need to heal and grow is abundantly coming into your life and affecting your trajectory. Before we get started today in speaking about Tyr and his effect, and certainly as a role model here to our existence, I want to take just a moment and say thank you to all of you who have liked, followed, subscribed, done all the super secret handshakes, and helped us to support or pass on this message that hopefully gives people inspiration and hope to living their lives their way. So for those of you who haven't, I ask that you please do the super secret handshake with any of the platforms that we're available on, whether it be YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, all of the audio platforms, Streamlabs, and most certainly check out New Reality TV, newrealitytv.com, of course, a streaming channel dedicated to providing a plethora of perspectives, of spiritual perspectives and understandings that can help us to obtain or maintain our mental space. For those who are listening who may need maybe another ear to bend or just another perspective, by all means, take a visit to my website, norsewhispers.com/coaching. There we can get a dialogue started and we can actually have a conversation. Hopefully we can provide that piece of information that you're looking for to move forward. As always, this morning we're live chat here on Facebook and on TikTok. So for those of you who may have a question or a comment, by all means, please feel free to throw it in the chat and we'll talk about it, bring it up. Today we're talking about the courage of Tyr. Now the courage of Tyr is represented or role model is the god Tyr, the Norse god Tyr. Now Tyr, for those of you who haven't studied Norse legends and lore very much, Tyr actually began his recognition back in the days of the Germanic tribes, before the Norse of fame and fortune. He actually started back, like I said, in these Germanic tribes that recognized him as the god of justice and law and balance. That's really what Tyr brought to those people's lives. Now later, particularly after his feat of amazing courage, putting his hand in the mouth of Fenrir, that Fenrir could be chained, he of course began this identity really as the god of courage. He really represented the courage that we all seek. When we think about these recognitions that the peoples had for the gods here, we can think about him really as this individual who's willing to stand alone, to be, on the side of righteousness and honor. And that's really what Tyr was about. This is where we really see his recognition as the god of law and justice, kind of standing against anything that was not honorable. Now, of course, for those of you who've studied, you know that honor was a really big thing with the Norse. Any little thing that was seen as a burr on our honor could be up to and including an outlaw. Now, in the days of my ancestors, the term outlaw was some pretty heavy stuff. That was the worst of all things. That was beyond any kind of punishment. Being an outlaw meant that you could become, if you were captured by those, particularly the ones that you had dishonored, you could potentially become a servant, a slave, and have to hopefully at one point rebuild your honor. So it was a very big thing. Now, as we see in the history books, as the Christian church came into Scandinavia and began to spread around, one of the ways that they were able to kind of dismember the group that my personal ancestry subscribed to, of course, being the Ulfhethnar, or the wolf skin, the wolf pelt. These individuals were capable, and this early church fully understood this. They were able to shapeshift. They were able to really bind with the spirit of the wolf, particularly in battle. But it really gave the Ulfhethnar and the Berserkers this kind of elevated status of being kind of the ones that we needed to make sure didn't rock the boat with this new church. So fairly early in the conquering, and that's what I'm going to call it, of the church in Scandinavia, we find them outlawing the Berserker and outlawing the Ulfhethnar. In that scenario, there would be, I'm pretty sure it was like 6 generations of my grandfathers who would be executed, hunted down and executed for their inclusion in this group called the Ulfhethnar. So it was a very real, very powerful thing. Now, the Ulfhethnar of legend would go on to, as you know, kind of work with King Harald Halfrigi to actually unify Norway. That would be one of their claim to fame, them and the Berserkers. When we think about these men, particularly they were men, the Ulfhethnar and the Berserkers, they typically were really Ulfhethnar more so than Berserkers. The Ulfhethnar were very cunning, and they hunted in packs, very much akin to their spirit brothers, the wolves. This meant that these individuals would have had connection, a spiritual connection, as I do, with the Landvætti, or that's an Old Norse word to mean spirits of the lands. The Landvætti, of course, were written, certainly in my family history, about rising up and actually working with the Ulfhethnar to conquer the enemies, long before that first sword was ever unsheathed. They could, move the land to become bogs, or let mountains slide so that there would be a mountain or a rock slide blocking paths and roads, pretty much preventing travel. So there was a lot that these Landvedi are credited to within many different battles, that particularly the Ulfhethnar, but the Berserkers as well, would have been engaged in throughout their existence. Makes me and really kind of fills my heart with my ancestry being of the Ulfhethnar, is the courage they had to accept a relationship with individuals, the Landvedi, which potentially, well, more than likely, didn't possess a physical form. They were without form. So they had these relationships with these spirits to better the mankind, to help the chieftain make good decisions, to protect their fellow clansmen as they traveled over the seas or over the lands. So there was a lot that this relationship brought to these individuals involved. So when we think about you, let us think for a minute about the wonder that you are. Many of us have a tendency to forget this. We get caught up in the modern day world of trying to meet somebody's social criteria, measure up to someone else's bar, and we do it kind of almost as a second nature. We don't really even think about it. But it's this measurement that we're trying to apply to ourselves that really doesn't apply, firstly and foremost. But secondly, it kind of forces, by its very nature, us to live outside of our authentic self. We then are trying to meet some social criteria that isn't designed, isn't fit for us. And that's what we do. We do it naturally because we're social creatures. The humans, human forms particularly, are social creatures. So we're trying to be included in a social group, in a community, in an order of sort. And we have a tendency to kind of let go who we are at our core. Sometimes we can join into these groups and we may not subscribe to their value system at all. And we don't want to even be there, but we feel this perceived need of being included. This kind of leads us to living a life of inauthenticity. Now, what does living this life of inauthenticity look like for us as we move forward? Well, one of the things it's going to cause is this intrinsic stress. Now, I know you're saying, well, what about that? This intrinsic stress may not even be measurable. You may obviously not have any physical symptoms, and so we kind of overlook it. We're too busy looking into the future or into these other scenarios that we have a tendency to overlook this. But what's going to happen is these small stresses of living inauthentic are going to build up in what we call, my ancestors call, the sheath of truth. Now, the sheath of truth is how, from a modern day science perspective, biochemistry is returned to the brain through the bloodstream. Biochemistry is released in the heart through these hormones, right? And a certain combination that eventually winds up in the heart. And when it gets back into the brain kind of looks at its composition and says, oh, okay, looks at its little recipe books, finds that chemical composition, and then assigns it this value of an emotional state, whether that be joy, happy, anger, depressing, gleeful, whatever it is. The brain is then going to find it in its little recipe book, and it's going to assign this value. Now, this value then has energy with it. This is processed through this sheath of truth. The sheath of truth, we've talked about before, and it's essentially a tube, and along the bottom can build up this silt. This silt is put in there by the stress caused by living inauthentic. When we're living inauthentically, we're going to pass along a little bit of silt that's going to wind up at the bottom of our tube, right? Now, as we go through life and there's no real emotional brunt force traumas, we kind of may miss this fact that we're building up this silt. Why? Because our emotional energy is processing fairly cleanly through our tube, and there's no real issues with it. In some cases, we can maintain the upper part of the tube, which is our cognitive space, allowing us to think through traumatic events. That trauma, or that cognitive space, is what kind of gives us that. Well, we've got some buffering going on. So our trauma comes through and it only takes up, say, this much of the tube. We've got some cognitive space where we can think, we can kind of break down the trauma and deal with it on these chunk by chunk bases. But what happens in life, as life normally happens, is we get an experience of a large amount of trauma, emotional trauma registered in the brain. Now, what's going to happen, unfortunately, is when we have this massive amount of trauma passing through this tube, if, firstly and foremost, because the silt isn't going to move, living inauthentically, we've built up this silt along the bottom. If that takes up too much room, the trauma that we're recognizing now is going to shift up, and it's going to kind of take over the space, that cognitive space that we just mentioned, thereby not allowing us to think about things. We can't think our way through this. This is where we talk about like blind rage, blind frustration. Those types of things are this trauma coming through this sheath, and we've knocked out now this cognitive space. There's no way we can think about it because our tube is fully functional at trying to process this trauma. Now, again, the silt won't move. The silt stays the way it is. We have to consciously work at getting that silt out of there, so that we can open up the tube, shift down the trauma so that we can regain that cognitive space and actually have steps we can move forward. So these are all very important parts of using our spiritual understanding to manage our mental health. Ultimately, if this trauma is too big and won't go in the tube at all, you're going to have what I call spillover. And spillover is where we're going to start seeing these physiological symptoms. Things like anxiety attacks, things like maybe even sweaty palms, tremors, those types of things. All right, even blackouts can be part of this. So there's all kinds of physical symptoms that are going to occur when the trauma doesn't fit in the sheath. The sheath will still be processing as fast as it can, but you're going to have this spillover. And the rest of the brain, of course, doesn't understand how to deal with this energy, and so it just throws up its hands and kind of surrenders to whatever occurs. This is, again, the body's reaction. Tremors, shaking, uneasiness, rapid heartbeat, rapid breathing, all of these symptoms you may find as your stress is being recognized by the physical body. It's overflowing our processing tube, right? And so when we think about the stresses that may occur in our lives, I want you to seriously consider how we're managing that tube. Now, when we're going to take a real quick break, when we come back, I want to talk about managing your tube, because it's super important that we learn how to do this to maintain a better mental space. We'll be right back after this short message, and we'll talk about managing the tube.
In the air. The time is now.
We're all waking up.
We're waking up.
We're all waking up.
It's all shifting.
New vibrations.
It's you.
It's you.
It's me.
It's all of us.
Together.
A new time.
A new day.
A new energy.
A new energy.
New reality.
Awaken with us.
Awaken with us.
Awaken with us.
newrealitytv.com.
Welcome back. Thanks for taking that very quick break with me. And I need to also give a shout out to Amink, AMNK 2011. And he says, he says, cheers, brother. And cheers, brother, back to you. Thank you so much for following us this morning and joining us in the TikTok chat. So, talk. And cheers to you as well. Today, we're talking about managing your tube and how to actually use your knowledge now, your intellect, that hopefully I'm giving you, to manage that which you process every minute of every day, and how to make sure that we're properly managing those three major areas of our processing tube. As we mentioned, we're going to constantly be processing emotional energy through this tube. So the main part of it kind of manages itself. It doesn't really need us to do anything about it. It's those other two spaces, the top part, our cognitive space, and the bottom part, that stress that we're causing ourselves intrinsically. We'll deal with the cognitive space first. Now, cognitive space, and many times what's going to happen is when a brunt force trauma comes into our brain and we're beginning to process that, it's going to that's one of the first things that gets pushed out is our cognitive space. Well, how can we maintain that if we're getting overwhelmed by the stress? Here's a tip. The tip is write it down. Affirmations are a great way at which to manage our cognitive space. A lot of times when we talk about a panic situation and we're really, we're just overloaded, right? I'm always reminded of earthquake drills, particularly here in Alaska. We do earthquake drills. Why? Because we need to be able to use cognitive space during the emotional rush of an earthquake. So what we do is we train, right? We do that secondhand, or that muscle memory of going through and how we're going to act when the earthquake occurs. And you probably do many others. Fire drills are another example. All kinds of these drills for elite athletes. They may practice the same skill over and over and over and over, so that it becomes muscle memory. Right? So they're not having to think about it. Their body can just react based on this scenario that they're going to brew up using imagination and visualization to actually bring to fruition, so that they can be prepared. They're making affirmations. These affirmations say, step one, we work through step one. Step two, boom, 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 boom. Step three, boom, 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 boom. This is kind of a battle plan, if you will. And what this allows you to do with these affirmations is be able to handle and manage our stress, which has now removed our cognitive space. Cognitive space is kind of taken up by processing this trauma. These affirmations allow us to have almost a pretend, if you will, muscle memory as to how to go through and deal with stress. Some people write, some people have little written tags that they use. Some people use remembering. They're going to use some type of jewelry, maybe to remember, some type of totem to help them to remember, hey, oh, wait. All right, I'm going to think my way through this. Here's step one. Step one says, stop, breathe, take a breath, allow that brunt force trauma to kind of wean down a little bit, hopefully gaining some cognitive space. And now we can think our way through this. The second part of managing our tube is, of course, living authentically. When we live authentically, we're allowing energy that's coming from our emotional filters to our heart. We're allowing it to process all the way through what my ancestors refer to as the well of the self. The well of the self is indeed just visualized as a water well, right? So, a deep tunnel or tube going vertically here. At the bottom, about halfway up, is water going all the way to the bottom. At the bottom of this well are a beautiful rock, beautiful mosaic of rocks, just laid out wonderfully, beautifully, uniquely to every human being or everything that has this well. And so all of these rocks are laid out in such a way that they alter the energy passing through it to release the biochemistry. Now, the visualization is really great because as we travel through the tube, these rocks represent the values that we've kind of absorbed throughout our lifetime. Those things that we hold important, the values and the virtues, such as, courage, honor, truthfulness, industrialness, hospitality. All of these are kind of in those rocks. And as energy is brought down from our emotional filter into our heart then processes all the way through the well, through these rocks, to an energy center at the bottom, which then releases biochemistry and or medically, physiologically speaking, hormones into the bloodstream that are then registered in the brain. So this tube, or this well, I should say, is kind of how we process this energy to release the biochemistry that our brain then recognizes as emotions. When we allow that energy to pass all the way through those rocks at the bottom to the energy center at the bottom, this is living authentically. We are subscribing to our values. We are making decisions. We are creating emotions based on our values, whatever those values are. Okay, so they're unique. They're beautifully unique to every individual. So whatever those values are, when we get to the energy center at the bottom of that well, we've processed all the way through the water, all the way through the rocks to this energy center to release biochemistry into the body. We're living authentically. If we decide that, hey, the water's just a little too murky, we're going to bail. So we're going to bounce off the surface and just go out the side right at the surface of the water because the water's too murky for whatever reason. This creates the stress. This is where we're living inauthentically. We've now got a delta from the energy center at the bottom to the energy center on the side that hasn't occurred, right? And so we took the hard right, and now we're building up the stresses in the mind. So when we're absorbing things emotionally, we want to kind of, instead of reacting, we want to respond. So we're going to allow this energy to pass all the way from our emotional filters all the way through the well to the bottom of the well. We're not going to allow ourselves to go out the side there. We're going to just foster and encourage that energy to come all the way down to the bottom. Now we're living authentically, right? And this is what's going to allow you to have a better mental space. When we start managing this, We're going to find tensions come down, stress come down, relaxation comes down, depressions come up, anxiety goes down. All of these different things are all going to come into balance now because we're living authentically to who you are. And you, my friend, are incredibly unique. You're wonderfully unique because you have a very different perspective than anyone else. Your collection of rocks at the bottom of your well of the self is unique to anything that has ever existed or ever will exist. We can try to be like you. We can try to subscribe to some of your rocks, but we're not going to get it all the way. We're always going to be a little different, and that little difference is what provides us with the beauty of a different perspective. We can see things now from a different point of view, and this is what's going to allow us to see around the challenges and the obstacles that lay in our trajectory through this physical lifetime. So it's super important. So today, as we meditate on the courage of Tyr, I hope that you remember that you're in charge. You get to make decisions as to what you're going to process, how long you're going to wait. You're going to, if you're going to allow this energy to move all the way through the well of the self, how you're going to manage your tube or your sheath of truth is what my ancestors refer to it. And then at the very end, before this experience that you've just had becomes a memory, you have a me gate, and that me gate is where you get to decide whether you're going to subscribe to that energy or you're going to change it, and you have the power to change that. If everything comes back because your emotional filters are set from the last present and the energy comes back and it's more negative in its display, you can change it. You can simply say, I want to be happy. I'm going to be happy. I'm going to have joy. And you can do that. And that's the me gate. Me gate just before it goes to memory. And when it goes to memory, one of the first things it's going to do is obviously set the emotional filters for the next present. All right? So think about and visualize that in your own mind, in your own perspective, how that looks to you, how living authentically, what does that mean for you, and how valuable would that be? All right. So today we celebrate the courage of Tyr, and I look forward to seeing you guys. I really do. Every morning, I look forward to spending some time with you, hopefully passing on some intellect that my ancestors have given me that can better our mental space. It can help us reduce anxiety, reduce depression, just get back to who we are, our happy, comfortable, joyful, harmonious selves. So hopefully today our role model Tyr will give you the courage to just be you. All right, my friends, we will see you again tomorrow when we will talk about the god, the chief god, Odin. And Odin tells us to seek wisdom and everywhere we go. So hopefully we'll talk a little bit more about that. In the meantime, for all of you who joined me, thank you so much for being with me. And I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow when we will talk about the wisdom of Odin. Love and light.
Watching Fulfillina's Belly Snake, a special production of Whispers of the Norse. Brought to you by the Alaska Wolf Hefnar in South Central Alaska. Guidance and wisdom, courtesy of an ancient Celtic Norse shaman. Thank you so much for joining us today.